couldn't wait. I couldn't. I'm so sorry, but I couldn't. I recorded Tsurune episode 11. I recorded it like around lunchtime today, and I was like, okay, nope. I'm gonna step away. I'm not gonna record anything else with Tsurune for another couple days. I'm gonna wait till I get some more comments and read those. And then I sat down tonight being like, well, I'm gonna react to something else today. And then I looked at everything that I had on my list, and I was like, well, I could react to that. I could react to that. I could react to that. But I really want to watch episode 12. I'm sorry you have to wait, but I couldn't. I couldn't wait. The urge to binge was too much. It was too much, and I was like, we need to start off this new year with Tsurune episode 12 and figure out what the hell happened. So I feel like the last reaction and discussion, I felt like I was rushing through it because I wanted to watch this episode as soon as I was done. And I still spent like a good 40 minutes talking about the episode, but I just felt like I needed to know. Like, we got so much with Masa in the last episode and figuring out, like, his tie to his grandfather and how he wants to get to know him and who he was. And he wants to find out, did his grandfather actually love him? And does this connect why Masa still wants to do Kyudo? And so we get all of that. And then you have the nerve, Kiwani, to end the episode with that one guy from the Nazasaki archery supply shop coming in and be like, hey boys, I know you got a tournament in 5 minutes, but your coach has been in an accident. So I could have told you after you all were done, but I decided to tell you now for the extra drama. And I'm like, why? So, and I was like, we don't know if it's serious. We don't know if it's just something like if the episode was just doing this dramatic cliffhanger and it's not that bad. I'm hoping it's not that bad, but it's like gonna go one of two ways. Either I'm hoping it's not a life-threatening thing and they all band together and they're like, okay, let's do this for Masa-san and band together and do our best. Or it's going to be like, no, it's something really serious and they all have to band together to do it for Masa-san. And either way, I feel like Minato is going to feel guilty because he convinced Masa-san to go. And I feel like the others are going to have to tell him like, no, dude, it's not your fault. Like these things just happen. But no, I was like, it's the penultimate episode, and I realized that we still got episode 13, and we still have the OVA before season 2 starts, but I like, how do you put a cliffhanger like that and then expect me not to go ahead and watch it? I couldn't do it. I was like, I couldn't. So I'm sorry. And that episode nearly made me cry last episode because of Minato telling him, like, don't wait until the last minute to go talk to the people that you love. I'm not going to lie. I went to my grandparents, like, right after that was over. I was like, I'm going to go with my grandparents and see them right now. And I did. And I felt really good about it. I was like, good. And I was like, yeah, because that just, like, cut to the core of me and, like, went in my heart. My grandparents don't live far from me. And so I was like, I don't see them nearly enough. And I was like, Minato's message, like, got to me. And I was like, no, I need to go visit them. And so I did. And I feel a lot better now. But, oh, man, y'all. Okay. All right. I don't know what to expect, but I will say this. I had laid out, I've got this little sheet of paper here. I laid out episodes of things that before I go on break, I needed to watch because I kind of maybe use my school Wi-Fi to upload some things because it's a lot better than my own. My Wi-Fi sucks. So I kind of use their Wi-Fi to upload like big files that I have on Vidyard. Tsurune is one of them. And so I had planned out that I needed to upload before I go on holiday break episodes 10, 11, and 12 before the end of this week. And so I was going to watch it ahead of time anyway, or I'd scheduled to. I'm just watching it a couple days sooner than I anticipated. But I am going to take a break after this episode to catch up on other shows. And then hopefully when I come back for episode 13, which is the season finale, I'll have lots of comments that I can talk about with you all. Or maybe not. Maybe we'll all be on the same page and I won't have anything of interest to talk about when I go into episode 13. But we'll see. Or maybe this episode will be so amazing that I don't want to wait around until episode 13. But I am going to wait a little bit. I am going to take a break, at least for several days after this, because I have other shows I need to catch up to. I should be watching right now, but I'm not going to because I want to watch this. So it's the Tsurune effect, right? It's the Tsurune effect. What can we do? But y'all, I'm sorry if I felt like I rushed through the last discussion, but I was so hyped up on adrenaline and was just like, what is happening? And now I'm like, I need to just let this episode happen. So yeah. So I hope you all are excited. I am too. I'm sorry I couldn't wait, but we just need to dive into episode 12. So that's what we're going to do. So we're going to do that here in 3, 2, 1. Let's do this. I feel better. I feel so much better now that I've watched that episode. That is a huge weight taken off my shoulders. And now they're in the finals. I'm glad that with that extra face-off, we didn't wait till the season finale to do it. I'm glad we didn't wait and do it then, because I was afraid as the episode was edging closer that we were going to wait and do the face-off and then it was going to rush to the final episode. But no, we managed to get it in. They just had 5 arrows they had to hit. The 5 arrows that the title of this episode is after. I don't even know if I'm going to use Whiteboard Coon, but last episode I was starting to regret it as I was talking about Masa. And I was like, I'm going to put it out here just in case if I decide to use it. I don't know if I will or not, because this episode is very much like just a big old pile of zen. I was like, thank you. But yeah, honestly, this episode was mainly Minato and Kaido's. Minato and Kaido like coming to grips with their own psyches and what they're dealing with. And I was like, yes, please. And of course my dog is like, hello. So yeah, I was really kind of upset with the Narazaki guy at first, because I was like, why are you telling them? But then it all makes sense. It's like, okay, this is what we're doing. So he says, I'm sorry, I don't know much about it myself. So they don't know what's wrong. So it's like the worst case scenario. There's no news. Nobody knows if it's a serious accident or not. Rin was just calling him as he was on his way to the hospital. Minato, of course, thinks the worst thing, because I don't know if anybody realizes it other than Seiya, but Minato's lost his mother to a car accident. So this is really, really impacting him. And I like that throughout the entire episode, Minato is the only one, he's the last one to get on his feet. Just kind of like the order of archery. He's the Ochi, he's the last one to stand on his feet. It kind of is like that the whole episode. So I guess we'll put Minato over here, where Minato has this moment where he blames himself. He blames himself for Masa's accident, right? And I'm so glad that Seiya's like, nope, we're not having that angst in this business. Hell no. He's like, I don't think Rin had made it to the hospital yet when he contacted me either. He sounded panicked as hell. I'm like, dude, you need to like maybe find a way to phrase it for these kids, but he's panicked too. He's like, I debated whether or not I should tell you, but Masa asked if I would, he's like, just before your match, he's like, but before he left, Masa asked me if I'd make you these. He had me order them. They're like headbands that are the color of their jackets. He's like, they're a gift for forcing him out of his cowardice. And that just, the way that that's phrased kind of fuels Minato for a second, because he's like, oh, I forced him to go. It's my fault. And it's like, no. Masa said he'd been a coward, but the team helped him. They helped him to overcome it. He had been afraid to reach out and ask questions about his grandfather and find out more about him, but the team encouraged him to go ahead and do it. And it's like, there we are, right? He said, thank you for forcing him out of his cowardice. And Minato, of course, takes that to be the worst case scenario. He thinks that he's forced Masa to go on this 10.5-hour drive, and it caused him to get in this accident. He's like, there's no way I'd let myself hold on to them, but I couldn't give them to you without telling you about the accident. So I get that. He's like, I had to deliver them for the match, but then he's like, I can't deliver them knowing what I know and lie to you all to your face. So he's like, I had to be honest. And it's like, okay. It makes sense why he did that, but it's like, oh my gosh. Like, I'm good that he decided to be honest, but man, the timing. And then Seiya's like, no, I get it. If you hadn't have told us, the shock would have been all the greater later on. Yeah, so that is true. If he hadn't been honest with him now, it may have been worse, right? And they would have been worried about why Masa wasn't there, and then that would have led the same route, and then it would have felt a lot better if they'd found out later on. So yeah, I think I gave him a really hard time last episode, but this episode I'm like, okay, it's been explained. We get it now. Okay. And then this poor guy's like, okay, good. Glad you're not pissed at me. Thanks. Here you go. And I like that Seiya, who's the captain, passes them out, right? And she says everyone, and she gives them to everybody. And of course, Kaido looks concerned. He's like, what the hell were you thinking, Masa-san? So again, we talk about Kaido. Kaido wears his heart on his sleeve. And I like that even though Seiya's captain, Kaido tries to be the leader, right? He's still trying to be the leader of the group. He's trying to be the leader or the motivator, right? Because I think that Seiya as a captain is a very soothing, stable presence, and he anchors the group, but he's not like, he's very like, when he says he's very level and even keel when he gives like a pep talk. I wouldn't go for Seiya for a pep talk, is what I'm saying. Kaido is like, gets everybody riled up, him and Minato do. But he's trying to be a leader motivator, but he also is very emotional. Kaido is extremely emotional. I say he's a tsundere, but he's very, very emotional. He just lets all of his emotions hang out. So I guess maybe he's not a tsundere. And Seiya's just like, and then with Ryohei and Nanao, they kind of take them and they just look at him very quietly. And the girls, good on the girls. The girls stepping up their game this episode and being like, we're going to call you boys out. Like, come on, let's get this. Like, and I feel like it's good that Yuna and Shigaraku are not competing, because they are able to, from an outsider's perspective, they don't have that pressure of competition on them. Seiya is like Seiya. She's just even keel and cool as a cucumber, even though we see that moment where she kind of breaks down a little bit. But Yuna and Shigaraku, they both like handle everything great. They're like, no, we need to be that outside presence that can come in and slap some sense into y'all and be like, buck up. And I'm glad that they're there. And then, man, Seiya getting down on Minato's level. He doesn't ask Minato to get up. He doesn't do that. He just gets down on Minato's level and he's like, hey. He's like, because he could tell, I'm sure, that this freaks him out. And I love that he just sits there and he goes, Minato. And Minato's just like stunned. And he looks at him. He's like, hey. He's like, you need to take it. And then he says, it's my fault. He's like, I knew I was pushing him. But because I told him to go, because I forced him, because he said that line, I'm the one who, and I love that, and he doesn't make the idiot sandwich. He doesn't do that, but instead he grabs his face and he's like, get a grip. I love that. It reminds me of in Love Actually. In Love Actually, there's a character whose wife dies and he's having like a breakdown moment, and his best friend, she like grabs him and she's like, get a grip. It's gonna be okay. You know, and I feel like that was this moment. And there, I love that Ryohei and Nanao are like, and Kaido's like, like just looking down at him. And he's like, none of that now. None of it. He's like, now is not the time. Now is not the place. You know that it's not your fault. He's like, none of it. I love that. He's like, it's not your fault. And I love that his hand just like lingers there like, it's okay. I freaking love it. Freaking love it. Seiya being that anchor for Minato. I love it. I love that he's there being like, we got this. You cannot worry about this now. Now is not the time. I love that. And Minato just being like that got me, right? I mean, granted, it's the craziest thing, right? Because it's so funny. The last few weeks, I've been watching ahead, and I've gotten to the episode with Seiya and Minato, and I've been like, wow, a new ship. And everyone in the comments have been like, so Shu and Minato, right? And I've been like, just wait till you see me bust out the second ship. Because I do. I'm a multi-shipper. I can ship multiple pairs. I'm fine with that. There is a part of me that's like, oh yeah, Minato and Shu. Of course. But then there's another part of me that's like, Seiya and Minato. Of course. Right. And then I guess if you want to go mega angst, you could have Seiya and Shu, but I don't see that, honestly. But yeah, so get our intro here, get past it. And then, of course, Masa. Masa in the OP now makes sense because it's like the leaves and stuff blowing past him. They're all thinking of him in the finals as they go into it. Oh, come on. I'm glad that they know he's okay going into the finals. I'm glad they were able to talk to him on the phone, know he's okay, and now they can move into the finals to try to, like, make him proud, right? Okay. And so, of course, we cut straight to Shu, who's been scoring perfectly all tournament. He's been hitting Kaichu since prelims. It's amazing. He's a first year. And of course, what I love is the realistic quality of how these boys are handling the situation. And I wanted to like break down like where they are. Like Minato is like grabbing the fabric of his pants, holding his phone. Ryohei is like a little dog kind of huddled near Minato with his phone. Kaido is the furthest from everyone, turned away from them so that he can't, so they can't see him. Seiya is right in the middle of things, like keeping an eye on Minato. And then Nanao is like crouched down at the ground looking at his phone. Like they're all super distracted. And the girls are a little, they're like, the boys are a little distracted. And Seiya's like, it's fine. She's like, it's okay. We'll just do what we have to do. And then she's by herself over there and says, it's all right. Like to herself as she's like bracing, which she's been struggling too. That is the one thing in this episode. I wish the guys had kind of been there for Seo a bit more. I wish they had been because I feel like that could have helped her. And she had to like be there all by herself. I am kind of sad about that, which that doesn't surprise me that they're like that because the guys and the girls, even though they're a co-ed team, have kind of been a little disconnected this entire series. Like the girls do their own thing and they kind of watch over the boys. So I'm not surprised that that's been the case, but it is a little sad because I feel bad for Seo. Like I wish she had had someone there for her. That kind of sucks. I hate that for her. And then this whole time, like the leaves blowing through everything, right? And so the boys are trying to look up car accidents, right? They're trying to find like something online to like give them some information. And Tommy Sensei is a freaking savage. Tommy Sensei is like a savage mofo. He walks up and he's like, man, it looks like a wake here. It's like, oh, Tommy Sensei, no. Like that's the worst thing you could say, especially like right in front of Minato, right? And the girls just look really aggravated. And then Minato, of course, is like, oh. He's like, Tommy Sensei. And like, did you get in touch with Takegawa's house? He's like, no one answered. And they all are so dejected. Again, Kaido is over by himself. Ryohei and Seiya are in the center. And Minato and Nanao are kind of like against there. I'm really glad that none of the Kurosaki twins or neither of them, we'll talk about them in a minute, but I'm glad that none of them came up to them during all of this because there would have been a straight up brawl. Kaido probably would have killed somebody if they had just showed up in the middle of all this. I'm glad they didn't. I was like, we have enough drama to worry about without them. So, but yeah, Nakazaki, that's his name. I kept calling him Narazaki. Nakazaki said there was no info on his end either. And they're all super distracted. And so they're all like trying to find news and everything. And the girls and Tommy Sensei are like, really? And I like that Yuna's like, I love she has the bandana wrapped around her wrist. And Shigaraku has it wrapped around her wrist too. I love that. Like, that's how they wear them. He's like, the internet's the most useless when you need it the most. If it were a major accident, it would be like, they're just freaking out about what's going on with Masa and not thinking about the tournament, right? And they're just sitting there saying like, oh, maybe the lack of information is a good thing and all this. And then we cut back to Seo and he's like, oh, Seo-kun. He's like, you didn't make it to finals, but you shot very well. And I like that she says, I did the best that I could, and so I don't have any regrets. Which I'm glad. I'm glad she doesn't have any regrets. I'm glad that Seo feels like she did the best that she could. But she's worried about the boys because they are not in a good place right now. Given how they're acting, they're not going to do well. And I like this Shigaraku, of all people, this girl, and I probably am saying her name wrong because I've struggled with her name this entire series, but I love that she is like, you know what? No, I'm done. She's like, I'm done. She's like, these boys need to buck up. I love that she stands up and she's like, you guys. And then Yuna like gets inspired too. She's like, are you going to stay huddled in a corner forever? And everybody's like, she's like, you spaced out on cheering for Sayo, and a bunch of your rivals shot in the boys individuals, and you didn't even look at them. What exactly did you come here to do? I love it. And I love that Yuna's like, yeah. She's like, Sayo was worried about the coach too, but she gave it her all and held it together right to the end. Think about what you can actually do right now. Stop staring at your phones, worrying about him. Like, what's that going to do? That's not it. And they all just kind of like look down at their phones like, oh yeah. I love that. I love that the girls stood up and they're like, this is not helping Masa at all. He would not be proud of you doing this right now and worrying about him. He'd be wanting you to focus on what's right in front of you. And I love that it's Minato that stands up and he's like Minato takes so much initiative in this, right? Minato takes initiative. He takes initiative not only to talk with the girls, but the whole thing with Kaido, which we'll get to, that was great. But yeah, like Minato, he's gone from being like this really kind of passive character at the start to being one that really takes charge. And I kind of like that because at the very beginning of this, I was afraid that he'd be kind of like Haru from Free, like way too much. But he's really not. Not really. He's much different. He is a true protagonist. He like just gets out of his slump and has that hero attitude that Ryohei was talking about earlier on in the series, which is really nice to see. And he apologized to Sayo, and Sayo's like, well, thank you, but... She also has purple eyes, looks like she could be related to Shu, just putting it out there. And I love that they all give them their phones. Like, take our phones, hold on to them while we do our thing. And I love that Yuna's like, I'll take very good care of it. Like, I love it. She's great. I love it. I love his has the dragonfly on it. And then they all give their phones up. Mm-hmm. And Seiya's like, we just have to believe that he's all right. And go from there. And then I like that Minato says he tells Seiya to thank you from before. And he does the thing with the face, right? And he remembers saying, he's like, for bringing me back. And Seiya's like, okay. I love that. I love that Minato, he acknowledges that he needed Seiya. I love that because, again, my thing with Shu is that Shu is like, well, Minato doesn't need you. He's fine without you. And I'm like, no, especially in this episode, Minato needed Seiya. And I'm like, I'm all for that, like Minato giving him credit. And he's like, we're going to be up soon. We need to do our best. All right. And so now here we go. The greatest trial is yet to come. Like, what do you do with this at your back? And so then Kurosaki finds out about... word travels fast in this archery range. Word travels fast, right? Which, granted, they were all talking really loudly around everyone else getting ready. So I'm sure that word has spread that Kazumai's coach is in an accident. And I like that Shu's like, oh, okay, like how is this going to affect him? These twins, though, these twins are a bunch of little bitches. I cannot stand them. Because the one twin says, oh, well, losing your coach is rotten luck. Which it's like, okay, just shut up from there. Don't say any more. But then the other one's like, I guess that talisman wasn't worth much, huh? And I'm like, you little bitch! That's so mean to say! Like, how dare you? And I like that the one guy, the guy that was the Noriren fan that's become Nanao's new secret bestie, I like that he's like, Sin, Mon, this isn't funny. Like, this is very serious. And they're like, fine. And I'm like, you guys are just a bunch of turds. And I want to chuck them off a bridge. Safely into water so they're not really hurt, but still chuck them off a bridge. And they say, Kurosaki just finished. And they're like, how'd it go? 18 hits out of 20. Fujiwara's been hitting Kaichus since individuals this morning. He's a monster. Mm-hmm. Impressive as ever. And Kaido, of course, is like, well, that'll make beating them all the sweeter. Mm-hmm. And so they're like, I know you all know this by now. Seiya speaks up and he's like, but this group match is made up of 2 halves. So we shoot 20 shots for a total of 40. So they only made 26 out of 40, which is not good. But they tied with the other team they had to beat to get the 8th place spot. Like, again, major run with the wind vibes. I'm just saying. But I was like, ah! So, and of course, they all have their own difficulties that they're facing based on how many shots that they hit. And they're doing okay. Everything's doing fine. But then we cut to what's going on through here. And then we see that Minato misses. And when he misses, of course, we get that moment of Shu watching, right? And it hits, and Shu's looking at him. Of course, Shu only looks at Minato like the whole time. Shu is not interested in anybody else. It's just Minato that he's watching, of course. Like, oh my gosh, Shu. He's so handsome. How can you not enjoy it? How can you not enjoy looking at this guy? But yeah. So, and then he misses. And so they're at 14 hits. And they're like, we're cutting it close. So, in other words, they only hit 12 the next time. So they did worse. And they all blame themselves because they're all worried about Masa. Like, their head's not in the game, right? And Minato's like, no, we're all thinking about it. And Seiya's like, nah, kicking ourselves isn't going to get us anywhere. We got to focus on what's next. And so, I like that we have Kaido, he calls Ryohei and Nanao by their first names, which is interesting. But he calls Seiya and Naramiya, Takahaya and Naramiya, he calls them by their formal names. So that's interesting. I find that interesting that before Kaido had called Nanao and Ryohei. Did that happen in episode 3? Was episode 3 when he called him Ryohei? I think it was. He earned Ryohei's respect in that episode. Interesting. Yeah, it's curious that he calls them by their first names, but not Minato and Seiya. He's like, it's time to remember what Masa-san taught you. Okay. Right now we need to try to hit the best shots that we can. Like, Kaido gets himself worked up way too much. And like Masa said, it's self-sabotage. He gets himself way too overworked and doesn't just let his natural ability shine through. He tries too hard. He forces himself, right? And so I like anytime we go over to Kurosaki, they always have like a slightly gloomy layer to them. It's interesting. But yeah, so we have this, it's like we have to go to the rock bottom before we can shoot back up to the top, right? So Minato figures out that he's afraid. He's like, I wasn't afraid in middle school, but I'm afraid now. He's like, I don't know why. He's like, but I'm more scared than I ever was in middle school. And he's trying to figure out why that is. And it's just that pitch black. He's like, I never felt this way during middle school matches. When did it start? He's like, I don't think it's the same feeling. It's not the same feeling as doubt with target panic. He's like, why am I so afraid? And I love that there's like moments where the screen just goes black and then it brings you back, right? And so each of them go through a problem. Kaido overthinks a lot, and it causes him to self-sabotage. He has so much natural ability that if he just lets it go through him and doesn't overthink, then he'll be fine. And Ryohei tries to think. They all try to think of what Masa taught them, and it causes them to just be too focused on that and not their latent ability. And then Minato is trying to say, like, he's trying to force himself to do good for Masa. He's like, do this for Masa. Focus for him. And it misses. And so he's like, why didn't that work? He's like, that felt right. He's like, it didn't hit. Everyone's shooting the way they usually do, except they're not. And the one guy from Kurosaki's like, that one really hurt. He's like, at least that's what it looks like to me. So I like that. I like that Minato says that perspective is everything, right? So he realizes that from his perspective, everyone is doing okay and normal. So why isn't he, right? Even when they're not. He thinks that they look like they are. And the girls are all like, oh, crud, this is not good. He's like, there's this fear that's not leaving me. And it keeps, like, the black screen keeps flashing. And then he has this epiphany. He realizes, he's like, there's no one behind me. And I love that when he says that, the screen slowly pans to show that there's no one behind him. I love that visual effect. That's so cool. He's like, I get why I'm afraid. I'm alone on this side. He's like, when I was competing in middle school, I always had Seiya and Shu behind me, so I could always count on them. So I was able to shoot with confidence because I knew that they were going to back me up. So he's afraid because there's no one to back him up. Right? And so he's like, now I don't have that. But now I'm there looking forward. He's like, why did you make me this? And then it all comes out. Masa's like, once you realize, it'll all make sense. And I love that throughout this entire episode, the screen, the entire thing, it like shows him upside down. It shows him in an angle. It shows him like trying to, like the gears are turning and he's trying to figure it all out, right? He's trying to put it all together. And then it finally clicks. He's like, I don't know why I'm here. And he's like, I still don't know why you made me the Ochi. And Masa's like, why? He's like, you'll get it. And then that's why Minato's like, why do you shoot, Minato? He's like, maybe now I can make that sound. I feel like I can't miss, like I'm going to hit. And it juxtaposes that, where he's like, that fearlessness he has, the question of why he hits, to now he's like, well, I'm afraid now because all I can do is watch what's in front of me. I was trying to win then. I'm sure that's how Inogi's feeling. The more obsessed you become, the further and smaller the target gets. He's like, all I can do is watch. And that's when he has the epiphany because he thinks of Onogi's back. And he realizes in that moment that, yeah, all I can do is watch what's in front of me. He doesn't, that's the thing. It's all about knowing what is in front of him. The past is irrelevant, right? The past is irrelevant, and he is not alone. That's the thing. That's the thing about it, is that that's what this is about. And it kind of, again, is going to go against what Shu's been telling him. Shu's like, well, archery is a sport that you do by yourself, which is true. Yes. But there's still a reason why you're all in a group of 5 people together. Even though you're doing it individually, there's that spirit of the team together. And Minato finally gets it. He's like, that's what this is. He's like, he wants me to look forward at everyone else and see the team in front of him, to see all the people he's with. He's like, it's not all about me. No, he is not alone, and it's not about him. It's not about him always, which is kind of interesting because the sports led up to believe that it is all about you individually and what you can do. But for Minato, he needs to see that he's not alone. He still has a team that's supporting him. I love it. Everyone is in front of me. Something so simple, and I didn't even realize. He's like, I love that he looks over at it. We are. And he hits it straight. It's a bullseye. And then we see it. Yeah. Like, that one looked really good. And I love that Shu kind of goes, what was that? What was that? So they barely squeak through, that they're tied for 8th. You'll alternate rounds of 5 shots each. And whoever hits more will advance to the finals. And so they're all like, oh my gosh. They're like, we barely made... I just love each of them are like, we barely made it. Oh my God. I love that shot of the 5 of them as they do like their collective sigh. I want to get a picture of that. But yeah, so Minato has had this like epiphany. This in as you should in the final hour, this epiphany. And Kaido is overthinking it. And he's like, if only we were shooting like we usually do. And Seiya's like, yeah, if nothing changes, it'll end the same. And they're like, what do we do? And Kaido's like, it's not enough. We need to remember more and better. And it's like, no. Minato makes the point where he's like, look, you already know it. We already know everything Masa's taught us. Like, we don't have to remember it and focus on it. It's already ingrained into us. So the more that we hyper-focus on it, the worse we're going to be, because we're not going to be thinking about what's in front of us. We're going to be focusing too much on what we already know. And we're overthinking it. And I love this scene so much. I love this scene where he's like, we need to remember Masa-san's teaching. And Minato's like, no, that's not right. He's like, everyone. He's like, no, when it's time to shoot, forget Masa-san's teachings. Focus on us. And for a moment, I like that Kaido's just like, I love this shot where Ryohei and Seiya are like, what? And then Nanao's like, and Kaido's like, excuse me? Like, their reactions are all so different, right? I love that this anime makes them so expressive in different ways. And Ryohei's like, wait a minute, how's that work? And Kaido's like, excuse me? And Seiya's like, he's like, I'm serious. And then Kaido, like, getting up in his face. He's like, are you screwing with us? And he's like, I'm being serious. Please hear me out. And Kaido, who respects Masa so much, I was like, Kaido, just hear him out. Let him speak. And he's like, we've trusted him all this time. Why are you calling it all bull? And he's like, I'm not. And he says, hear me out, Kaido. And I was like, oh, you used his first name. Okay. And Kaido gets very much like, because it's a big deal to saying a first name with no honorifics is like, that's like a big deal. You've crossed a line. You've gone into the friend zone, right? The very intimate friend zone. And Kaido's like, he's just like you, like, and he looks so angry and offended. He's like, don't you dare use my name without honorific. And he's like, okay, Kachan. And he's like, oh, like, Minato has some secret sass in him. He did it with the twins back in episode 8, right? Or episode 9. He did that back in episode 9 with them. And it was like, oh, episode 9 or 10. He's like, that's even worse. I was like, now the Kachan I get, because that's like reserved for Nanao. That's like a family name. Like, only Nanao gets away with saying that. We don't say Kachan unless we're Nanao. But oh my gosh. He's like, hey, he's like, you don't get to call me by my first name. And Minato's like, no, I will call you by your first name. And Kaido's like, just, damn you. And I love that he grabs with his arm. He's like, no. I'm not going to let Nanao pull you off of me. And he says, Kaido, Nanao, Ryohei, Seiya. He's like, we're a team. So, and they're all just like, oh, it's not just Kaido, it's all of them. He's like, so I'll say what I want to say. So hear me out. And I think I have to say this. And Seiya's like, all right, say your piece. What you got? What'd you realize, Minato? What'd you crack the code? And then he tells them all that how he's been afraid ever since he became the Ochi. He was afraid that he was fighting alone. But he realizes that that's not the case. He's like, I wasn't looking forward, that's all. I wasn't seeing all of you there beside me. I wasn't trusting all of you. And that narrowed my point of view. And they're all just like, oh, so I should look at all of you. And that's when it came together. He's like, when you're focused on shooting, were you focused on remembering what Masa-san taught you? He's like, have we all been in the same boat? And they're all like, oh yeah, well, yeah, we have been. And Kaido's like, what's wrong with that? He's like, I don't feel like doing that. I feel like doing that caused something to slip out of place. He's like, your shots became more awkward than before. And I love that Minato can see all of them ahead of him, so he can tell Kaido, he's like, your shots got worse. I saw it myself. So clearly something's wrong. And Kaido just looks so sincere at him. He's like, we should just be shooting. We don't have to think back on every little thing that Masa-san taught us, because it's already part of us already. We just have to believe in ourselves and focus on shooting the best that we can. And I love Seiya's like, yeah, okay. He's like, Masa-san's accent. I like that even after everything, Takegawa, Seiya can't call Masa-san. He calls him Takegawa-san. He still calls him by his last name. He hates him, remember? He hates him. And that part earlier on in the episode where Masa was like, are you okay with being taught by somebody you hate? And he's like, well, personality and ability are two separate things. Which is kind of hilarious because Masa and Minato have very similar personalities. So it's like, what can you do? What can we do? And I love Nanao. It's just like, it's too much to think about, right? And Ryuhei is like, yeah, if we keep it up, it'll be like it's all Masa's fault, isn't it? And Kaido's like, I can't accept that. And Kaido's like, are you saying I was wrong? he's like, damn it. He's like, it makes me mad because you realized it before I realized it for myself. Yeah, because Kaido's not really a mean person. He just has a lot of pride, and he wears his heart on his sleeve, right? And sometimes it's not a good combination, right? It's like the tale of 3 arrows, except that it's 5 arrows. And I don't know what the tale of 3 arrows are, but I'm sure that someone in the comments will chime in what they are. And then they call the high school up to compete. And it's like, okay, like, this is our last chance. And then Kaido's like, fine, I guess we'll do this. He's like, let's go, Minato. And then he says, Ryohei, Nanao, and Seiya. I love Minato's like, okay, yeah, I need to go back and rewatch the episode and see, because Ryohei and Nanao looked kind of surprised when he said their names, so I need to go back and see earlier on in the episode if he actually did call them by their first names earlier on in the episode. And then, yeah, they go do it, and they all make their shots. The aura's changed. I like the girls who are like, what happened? What pep talk got them up to speed? And it's like, it's all been Kaichu's up until now. Their opponent missed one, so as long as they... So yeah, they kept shooting in 5 intervals until somebody misses, right? And they've been doing it all this time. And so the twins are like, what's up with them? They're hitting all their shots. So as long as Minato doesn't miss, they're going to advance. And the one guy, the Noririn guy, is like, this should clinch it. And I love that Yuna's like, come on, please, please, please. And then he shoots. And I just love, whenever Minato, like, gets in the zone, he has, like, these, like, they almost look like soulless eyes, like he's just hyper-focused ahead. And then he just lets it go. And Shu notices, like, his form and everything. And then there's the Tsurune, right? Right? The leaves. And yeah, and Shu's smiling like, there it is. There it is. Shu smiling like, that's the shot that I knew. That's the shot I'm used to. Yeah, this show makes it so hard, right? Because I want to ship Minato and Seiya so bad, but I also want to ship Minato and Shu so bad. So this series does not make it easy on me at all. But yeah. Like, Shu's like, there he is. He's back. He's back, baby! And then it gets hit. Oh my gosh. And there we are. And it hits, and there we go. And they managed to make it through. And then Rin comes in, and Rin's looking at the tournament results, and I feel like Masa's like, oh no, like, Seo didn't get through. She didn't clinch it. But he's like at the hospital phone and says that the boys made it through. And it looks like he has a head injury. He's like, oh, really? And then all the boys, they manage, they're like, I love that they're like, calm down, you guys. And I love that Kaido's like, where's Masa-san? Put us on. He's like, you popular ass. I absolutely love it. I love it. If you look, like, Ryohei is like, is everything okay? Kaido and Minato are like right up against Ryohei, or right up against Rin. Nanao has him nearly in a headlock, and Seiya's just backed off a little bit. Seiya's like, okay, yeah, is he okay? Is he cool? Like, Seiya's the most distant out of all of them. I love it. And then he says, are you guys okay? I was worried about you, everyone. Like, are you all right? And he's like, yeah. They're doing some tests. I love that as he says he's all right, Minato and Kaido and Nanao and Ryohei, they're like, and Seiya just goes, like, he just is like, okay, good. Like, he just says like a little silent prayer. And I love that the girls and everything are like, okay, I can walk around and talk at least. Yeah. And then Kaido's like, you had us worried, you know? And he's like, I'm sorry. And I love that Seiya puts his hand on Minato's shoulder like, it's going to be okay, right? It's going to be fine, eh? And he's like, yeah. And then he's like, is that you, Minato? We made it through. He's like, yeah. I love that little gesture. That little gesture where he like closes his eyes like he's about to cry on the phone. Stop. And he says, you all worked hard, didn't you? Oh my God. And he's like, yep. They did. I love that he looks over to Seiya. And they all look at each other and they're like, yes. And now we're ready for finals. This episode didn't leave a lot of I mean, it was pretty action oriented. There was a lot of archery in it, but I love that Minato finally realizes why he's the Ochi and realized what was going on. It was like perfect timing, right? It felt very much like Free when they all come together as, you know, they all come together and realize that they're a team, which I hadn't really realized this, but in Free, they all call each other by their first name, like, right off the bat. They're like, the Nakama flows through their veins, like, straightforward, right? But then again, in that series, they've all been, like, childhood friends most of their lives. So it makes sense they're all on first name bases, right? Whereas here, Kaido and Nanao are kind of new to the fold, right? So that's interesting. But I like that now they're all like, okay, we're all a team. Here we go. What we do. Oh, my heart. I loved that so much. That was so sweet. I'm so glad Masa's okay and that everything's all right. But oh my God, y'all. That was like warmed my heart. That episode like warmed my heart and just like was like drinking a big mug of hot chocolate. It was just like the best. And now we have the season finale up next. And to see what's going to happen in the finals. I don't think they're going to win. I think that Kirasaki's probably going to win. But I think that Shu hopefully... I want Shu to have a conversation with Seiya and Minato by the end of it. I want the three of them to come together and reconcile from middle school. And what I want to happen is for Minato to be like, Shu, we can totally be together. But... Seiya's my bestie, and he's not going away. So you need to get over that. Like, I want him to tell Shu that he's only able to do as well as he can because he has others around him that keep him grounded and keep him anchored, and Seiya is one of them. Because again, when Seiya and Shu last talked, Shu was like, Minato doesn't need you, you need to back off. And I want Minato to be like, hey, Seiya's an important part of my life. Need him to be there, but you, Shu, you and I can still be together, right? That's what I need. But I need the three of them to talk by the end of this season, and because I don't know what the OVA will be about. I'm assuming it'll be kind of like a bridge between the seasons, or it'll just be something that's filler or for fun. I don't know how that'll work, but I definitely want the three of them to talk. I want Masa to show up there afterwards, or for them all to go to the hospital and see him. I don't know if he'll be able to show up in time for the finals, but I want them to all go to the hospital, see him afterwards. That would be good. And I don't think they're going to win, but I think that they'll do well enough. And I think Minato might get to a point where he realizes he can't get over his target panic. It's just going to take time and practice and work. But oh my gosh, season finale. So I am going to wait a little bit. I chugged through these episodes the last few weeks because I wanted to binge. And I will wait a little bit. I can't tell you I'm going to wait several weeks. But I'm going to wait a little bit and at least see some of your comments from the videos before moving on to the next set of episodes. So, with that in mind, I hope you all have a wonderful week. Please stay safe. Take care. I hope you all enjoyed this reaction discussion. But next week, we will be at the season 1 finale of Tsurune.